So Orna, what does raise your volume mean to you?
Raising my volume means I get to be my true, authentic self all the time, no matter where I am or who I'm with.
Welcome to the Raise Your Volume Academy podcast. I'm Tiphany Kane, your host. And I have a question for you. Have you ever been in a relationship that made you feel terrible about yourself? Have you ever been in a relationship where that person purposely, emotionally hurt you? Have you ever been in a relationship where that person physically harmed you? If you said yes to any of these, then this episode is for you today. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and today we're talking about that. So yes, trigger warning. We are talking about domestic violence, and our guest today is going to get into her story, and it is pretty graphic, pretty violent. And we're going to be talking about what domestic violence looks like, how we get there, why us, why did I get myself in this situation? How did this happen to me? And we're going to talk about how to change those patterns. This is such a powerful conversation today. I know you're going to love it. This is a little bit of a long episode, but it's worth hanging on till the end, I promise. So let me tell you about our guest. Our guest back in 1994 found herself in a relationship with a charismatic, attractive, charming man who ended up being her abuser. And she's going to tell us the story, so I'm not going to go too deep into her story, but it was a horrific act of abuse that she had to get herself out of. And then she spent time figuring out, how did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? And how do I change it? Now, she is in a beautiful, loving, committed, respectful, healthy relationship with her husband, Matthew. And together, they actually are coaches helping people to break patterns and get into beautiful, loving relationships. She talks about creating love on purpose, and that is what she does. And she's actually writing a book about it right now, which is pretty darn exciting. Her name is Orna Walters, and I am just so thrilled for you to hear this conversation today and learn from Orna about what toxic relationships are, what abusive relationships are, and how we can change our patterns and get out of them. Enjoy the episode. As you heard in the introduction, we have the amazing Orna Walters with us today. Orna, I am so thrilled to have you here with us today to talk about such a difficult subject in such a lovely and compassionate way. So thank you so much, Orna. Welcome.
Thank you, Tiphany. Thank you so much for being here. It's so important for me and you to have these conversations and other women. And I really want to inspire more women to come forward and share their stories, because that's the only way we highlight this conversation. So thank you for being willing to go there today.
My pleasure. And with that in mind, I want to hear your story. So today you're in a loving, beautiful marriage, and you teach people how to be in beautiful, loving relationships. But you have a domestic violence story in your past. And I already gave everybody a little bit of a trigger warning. This is a graphic story. But will you please share with us what your history with domestic violence is?
Absolutely. I just want to start with, there's a piece of my brain sometimes that thinks it's kind of weird that I'm like internet famous for being a wife, because for most of my life, I didn't know if I'd ever be a wife. Mm-hmm. I had grown up in a home filled with abuse, emotional and physical abuse. I wasn't that little girl who ever dreamed of my wedding day. I didn't know if I ever wanted that. I didn't think anybody would ever like stand in front of their friends and family and pledge to love, honor, and cherish me. Like I didn't I didn't know I didn't think that would be a thing. And in my 20s, my mid 20s, I was in a relationship with a guy that I thought was going to be the guy. We've all been there, right? You think, oh, this is going to be it. And about a year and a half into the relationship, about a year of living together, it was New Year's Eve. So New Year's Eve of 1994, the boyfriend I lived with came home. I had gotten off work. I worked that evening and I was in our apartment and I couldn't find him. I didn't know where he was. And he came through the door and at first he was super loving. And then I don't know, something like he snapped, like he turned on a dime and he tried to kill me. And there was a moment when he was on top of me, literally beating my head into the hardwood floors. And I did what women are told to do. I reached down and I grabbed him by the cojones. And I know I'm holding tight and he still has my hair and my head really tight. And he screams, "Let go of me." And I say, "Let go of me." And so he finally let go of me and I felt like I was in this death grip or something. And, so he let go of me, I let go of him. And then he punched me in the face. And later the neighbors told me that's when the neighbor came over because he hit me so hard that they heard him hit me in their apartment through the walls. And so the luck for me was, and why I'm here today, is because when he came home, he didn't close or lock our door. So our front door to our apartment was actually ajar. So when that moment happened, the next thing I know, this like bodybuilder dude who lived next door came in and saved my life. And those physical wounds, I will say, they took a while to heal. But the thing that really plagued me was, how did that happen? Like how did I choose somebody that would be abusive when that was the last thing I wanted? Because having grown up in a home full of abuse, I remember in my earlier 20s, earlier than that, early 20s, my therapist called my dad a rageaholic. And I was so young, I thought she coined that phrase right there in the room. Like I'd never heard that before. I thought she literally coined it just for my dad. And so I was like, whoa, how did this happen to me? And so that sent me on a trajectory of how did I do that? And I think so much of the work that my beloved husband and I do, we're kind of known in our industry, in the dating coach industry, as like the pattern identifiers and breakers. And I know many, Tiphany, because I know you're aware of this, but many of your listeners may not know that really the most difficult pattern to break is somebody where the familiar is toxic or abusive. That's the most difficult pattern for somebody to break in the dating process, because the way our mind is set up, our subconscious mind, it has one job, and the only job it has is to keep us alive. And it does this by zeroing in on what's familiar. So we end up in these cycles and in these patterns, whether you've had abuse or not, or toxicity or not, or anything, we all have a pattern. Because if you're listening to my voice right now, you are the common denominator in all of your relationships. And so really that's my life's work with my beloved Matthew, to help people identify their patterns and then break them.
Thank you for so candidly and so openly sharing your story. And you said a couple of things in your story that I think our listeners will really resonate with. You asked the question, how did I get into this? This was the last thing I wanted. How did this happen to me? Which I'm pretty sure any woman who has been in a toxic relationship, an abusive relationship, has asked that question on more than one occasion. So that is one of those echoing questions that I would love for us to dig into today. The other thing you talked about was toxic and abusive relationships. And so what I want to do before we get into that, how can this happen to me, is define for people, just in case they're not quite sure, what is a toxic relationship? What is an abusive relationship? What are those things? would you give us a quick definition of toxic, quick definition of abusive, and how they're related?
Sure. I think every family has their dysfunction. So we're not talking about dysfunction in a general sense. We're talking about like hyperbole dysfunction, right? Like dysfunction on steroids. So we hear these labels of emotional abuse and physical abuse. And I think when we think abusive, for me, it's easier to split those two. And so I don't want to get into semantics and all that. Maybe other people have different definitions. I'm open to you having your own. You don't have to take mine. But to me, abusive is where it gets physical and where your life is in danger. Whereas toxic and or emotional abuse in that regard is an effect on your emotional well-being. So to me, abusive is a detriment to your physical well-being, right? Whereas toxicity is a detriment to your emotional well-being, your sense of self. And that does mean they spill over, right? They're under the same umbrella, because physical abuse will definitely affect how you feel about yourself emotionally. So those go together, right? But it's like, let's separate them out. So that's the way I like to separate them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, because I know that gets confusing in people's minds often. And I often think it's a little bit of a disservice that we only think of abuse, like we only go to the physical, because so often it starts in that toxic emotional realm before any physical anything happens. And if we're able to identify identify it in its toxic state, then we can be saved from that terrible physical. So that's just my little soapbox. Totally different tangent, but
no, actually, I think it's an important point you're making, and it's not a soapbox. I mean, you can think about anything that doesn't have you feeling good about yourself. I remember when I was very actively dating and very much in a whole new place with everything behind me. And I remember going out with this like super hot guy. And as soon as we parted at the end of the date, my inner critic was like, you didn't, and you haven't, and you should have, and you didn't, and you haven't, and you should have. And I was rewinding the whole entire date through my mind, beating myself up with my own inner critic. And I went, I'm never going to see that guy again. That's not that anybody who sparks my inner critic is not my match. And
I love that you said that. Oh, I love that so much. I love it, because so many times we feel like we have to justify why we're not going to see somebody again. And I didn't feel good on the date is a good enough reason. Shout that from the rooftops.
Yes, we're shouting it right now, right?
I love that. Okay. And I also want to say that toxicity can be harmful for your health. I know in my marriage, I was with my ex for 19 years. At the end of our 19 years, when I finally filed for divorce and got the process going, I was on 12 different medications. I had been hospitalized multiple times for blood pressure issues and kidney issues and thyroid issues. Like, I had been taken in an ambulance to the ER and called a code stroke on. And about 6 to 8 months after, I was on one medication and healthier than I'd been in my whole entire life. So I also want for people listening to know that even if your toxic relationship, somebody doesn't raise a hand to you, that toxicity can cause physical harm. And so pay attention to your body if you start noticing things happening. And it's like you said on that date, like, I don't feel good. Things are not right. That's a good thing to take notice of as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the difference then in my definition, I'll tell you why I separate them out that way, because how you deal with what's happening is, in a sense, in your own body. So it's like the physical abuse is when that person is physically harming you. It doesn't mean their emotional abuse, their toxicity, right, doesn't have an effect on your physical well-being, because we all know our emotions chemical in our body, right? When we're happy
Yes.
and we release all those good feeling emotions and we're flooded with serotonin, or when, with sex, we get oxytocin, a bond with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when we feel badly, right? I mean, just fake being angry for less than 30 seconds and you will feel angry, because your body, your brain doesn't know the difference if you're faking it or not, and it'll release all of those chemicals into your body. You will feel angry if you fake it. And here's the other great thing: you can fake laugh. I love this as an exercise. It's a great pattern interrupt. And there's 3 sounds we make when we laugh, right? Ha, 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 ho, 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 and he. And I like to rotate those when I'm faking it. And eventually it's so ludicrous. You start really laughing, and you smiling and doing that, your brain won't know the difference. It'll release all those feel good chemicals, and you can state break immediately and feel better about something, even if you just had a bad day.
Mm-hmm. That's a lovely tip. Okay, so let's move forward into that other thing you talked about, which was, oh my God, how did I get into this? This is the last type of relationship I ever wanted. This is not something I was seeking out. This is not something I was looking for. How did I get into this relationship? Because like I said, I think everybody listening that has been in a toxic / abusive relationship, like, they have asked those questions. How did I get here? So I'd love to start exploring that with you. And I know you work on this a lot.
Yeah, this is, again, back to my life's work. My husband and I aren't scientists, but my husband studied the brain. He's certified in neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, therapeutic imagery, and hypnosis, which is all about how the brain works and the language of the brain. Like, your conscious mind understands me in English right now, but your subconscious doesn't understand English or Swahili or French, right? It doesn't speak this language. So, I wouldn't be able to say, like, if you were a client, Tiphany, I couldn't say, hey, Tiphany's subconscious, you're worth loving, right? I'm not doing anything, right? So I could talk all day long. So the subconscious mind, the language of the subconscious mind, is symbol, image, story, and metaphor. So if you remember,
symbol,
yeah,
image, story,
and metaphor. Symbol, image, story, and metaphor. So if you're someone who ever has remembered a dream that you've had, when you wake up in the morning, you remember your dream, that's kind of how the subconscious works. Because, things change and morph, and it's metaphors and it's symbols. And so if you've ever been looking at one of those dream books, right, but it might say something about a snake, but there's a huge percentage of people that are terrified of snakes. And so that cookie cutter answer isn't going to apply to you if you're someone who loves snakes and you have a pet snake, so those cookie cutter things it's all the meanings that you've assigned to these particular symbols in your dreams. So now when we look at the brain through dating and how we select a partner, the brain science of attraction tells us that what is highlighted, what is familiar, that's what the brain is guiding you towards. Because again, the subconscious has that one job of keeping you alive. And so it might be a spot on match. Like for me, I had abuse in my childhood. It was familiar. Love and pain were intertwined in my family of origin. And I zeroed in on this guy who was an abuser, even though he was incredibly handsome and incredibly charming. Right. So my brain picked that guy because somehow in my subconscious, sifting through 2 million bits of information in every moment, was like, this is the guy that matches familiar, because we learn about love in our family of origin. So my husband and I coined this phrase we call your love imprint. And just like you learned to walk and talk in your family of origin, you also learned about love. And we're never going to bag on parents here, because that's the toughest job on earth, right?
Parents are doing the best they can with the tools they have.
They're working at maximum capacity.
Yes.
But in my case, my parents had very limited capacity, right? So we're never going to bag on parents. So there's the parent doing their best, and then there's the child taking responsibility for a parent's behavior, right? We always say, like a little child, like in your family, when you were a little girl, a little boy, you didn't have the capacity to say, gee, mom, this is really bad parenting. Gee, dad, this isn't right at all. What are you doing? What I really need is for you to give me a hug and tell me that you love me. We don't have the capacity to do that. Instead, we internalize all of our parents' behavior and give it meaning about us. So we say, what is wrong with me that my parent is behaving this way? So in a sense, we're dealing with like the human condition, because on some level, all of us weren't loved exactly the way we wanted to be loved in our family of origin. We come into the world as like the physical embodiment of the energy of love. And I think it's why we love being around babies. A newborn baby has no blocks to love. They'll shine that spotlight of love on anyone who's around, and they will give love to anybody. Right? They'll receive love from anybody and give love to anybody. And that's how you came in. If you're hearing my voice right now, you are lovable because you are love. You are worth loving. It's not separate from you. It doesn't matter your past. It doesn't matter your behavior. It doesn't matter the mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter anything, because you are love. And so we learn about love very quickly, even though we come in with this unconditional state. We learn very quickly that love in some ways is conditional, right? Maybe you get daddy's attention when you get good grades, or when you twirl the baton just right, or maybe, when you hit that home run, or you strike out, 5 people if you're pitching, right? Whatever. Like, you're getting goodies from your parents all along the way based on who they are and their capacity. And so we start to make decisions about ourselves. And here's the interesting part, because we don't have a time machine, right? I can go back to the past and change those plot points. I can't do that. However, when you're a little kid in your family and you're assigning meanings to particular events, those meanings are actually malleable. They're changeable.
Okay.
And I'll give you a great example, because we do this in our lives, but we don't think about how we're doing it, right? Like if we had something happen to us and we're telling a friend because we just want to vent, and we're like, oh, the terrible thing happened, wah, and you're getting some sympathy and empathy, right? And you're bonding with that friend over this, the thing that happened, wah. But if you're at a party, maybe you want to tell that story and you want to get a laugh, because maybe it's been a while and it can actually be kind of funny. You'll start highlighting different things. So you'll bend it. You'll take artistic license, let's say, right? We'll take artistic license based on the intention we have for telling that story, right?
Yes.
So our meanings are malleable and our belief systems are malleable, right? Like if you were raised to believe in Santa Claus, like I want to ask you now as a grown-up, as an adult person, do you still believe in Santa Claus? I bet. Were you raised to believe in Santa Claus, Tiphany?
No, I was not, but that's okay.
That's okay. I wasn't either. I was raised in a Jewish household. But those of you who were raised to believe in Santa Claus, I bet it was quite the shock when you realized Santa Claus isn't real. And you were probably really upset about it. So I want to ask you another question. Are you still upset about it now? Nope. So our meanings that we assign to things and our belief systems are changeable. And that's our free will choice. And that's why I'm backing up what I said earlier. You don't have to earn love. You are love. You don't earn love by doing. We're not human doings. You're a human being if you're hearing me right now. And just because you be here today, you are worth loving.
So taking that information and taking it to that, why did I make this choice? Because this is really beautiful. This is making me think, okay, so in the future, I can change my choices because I can change my story and I can change my meanings. But how does that get us this knowledge that we attach these meanings to things subconsciously? How does that get us into these toxic relationships? Make that connection for us.
Well, every single one of us has been brainwashed from the minute we popped out of the womb that everything you want in life, everything worth having in life, you should get educated, have a skill set, practice, make efforts, except the most important decision you'll ever make in your life. The single decision that you'll make that will affect every area of your life more than anything else is your life partner, who you share your life with. But we're brainwashed to believe, oh, that'll just happen. Magically, one day, if it's meant to be, but it's also meant to be if it doesn't happen. What? It's meant to be if it does, it's meant to be if it doesn't, right? We all believe in the myth of love by accident.
Yes.
I met my beloved husband in 2007. And if I said to you right now, Tiphany, well, in 2007, Matthew and I met and decided to choose to love each other forever. At some point, not in 2007 probably, but later.
Yeah.
It would sound weird. You'd be like, what? I don't know. Because I have no other choice even in our languaging to say Matthew and I met and fell in love. Like I slipped on a banana peel and I landed on Matthew.
Right.
So stop leaving your love life to chance, like buying a lottery ticket. The chance of winning the lottery is 1 in 242 million. You have a better chance of being struck by lightning. Truly.
Yes.
So when you realize that you can change those meanings, when you realize that you don't have to earn love, when you have the awakening that what is familiar is highlighted, then you want to embrace what we call slow love. Slow love means you're not expecting to know because you looked in someone's eyes. Right? I want to caution you from diving in because of a feeling. Because I'm going to ask you, Tiphany, because you're here with me right this minute. Have you ever had a feeling last?
No, they're fleeting. They're pretty darn fleeting. Otherwise, we'd be happy forever or sad forever or mad forever. Like they're pretty fleeting. Some last a little longer than others, but no, yeah, they're pretty fleeting.
Exactly.
So I think what you're talking about with this feeling is this romanticized notion of chemistry, of the lightning struck and that's how I know that we're in love because we're sizzling and we have this chemistry. And I think a lot of times that chemistry is that old programming saying, oh, this is that painful love you were raised to believe is actually love.
I don't want to call it chemistry because chemistry is an essential ingredient for lasting love. So you can't forego it. Like we have a lot of clients at Love on Purpose who are divorced from like what we call the should guy. I should marry him. He'd make a great father. I should marry him. My family, my friends like him. I should. Right? The nice guy. And they're divorced from that person because you can't settle for a lifetime. So if you were going to make bread and you got all the things at the market, but you came back without yeast, you'd end up with a cracker. And you're never going to be satisfied with a cracker if you were waiting for yummy bread, right? So I want you to think about chemistry differently. So the chemistry spark is essential. But if you are somebody who's survived a lot of, if you have that pattern of a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship in any way, or you just want to break any pattern you're stuck in, like you keep attracting a narcissist or you keep attracting a cheater or you keep attracting an addict, right? Any cycle that you're looking to break, if you're looking for those people, then you have to negate them, right? Because I talk to a lot of people. So you can't be highlighted for those people. That's like telling your brain, don't think of a pink elephant. Like don't think of a pink elephant right now. You have to think of that pink elephant and then negate it. So you don't want to have a highlight looking for the people you don't want. That makes it a lot harder. So instead, you want to realize, think of how the body sensation, go back, like journal it out, write down, how does it feel in your body? That feeling of what you would call falling in love. What is this body sensation? Where is it? And what does it feel like? Does it feel comfortable? Does it bring you comfort? And does it feel like it's on a solid foundation? If you haven't had the kind of love that I have now, I'm going to say it like that because, if you're not having if you have had unhealthy love and now you want healthy love, I guarantee it didn't feel comfortable. It didn't feel, we get all the time people saying, well, it's like a spinning and I feel out of control, or I feel like I'm dizzy, or I feel all the butterflies, and it doesn't have a solid foundation.
Right.
So
I feel lost without him. I'm unmoored when he's not there. I miss him when he's not there. Yes.
Yeah. And so, but again, it's romanticized, right? Like we've got that Jerry Maguire myth, right? That super famous, really, makes me crazy, that Tom Cruise movie, right? The Jerry Maguire, where he says, "You'll complete me," and it's supposed to be romantic. That's a codependent relationship.
Yes.
A healthy relationship are two fully formed grown-ups, right? Like the bad math of the Hollywood movie is 1 + 1 = 1. You complete me, right? I come together with somebody and together we make this, other entity. And so 1 + 1 = 1. Matthew and I have bad math too, but our bad math of a healthy relationship goes like this: 1 + 1 = 3. So a whole and complete person comes together with another whole and complete person, and together you form a third entity, and that's the relationship.
Oh, I love that. I love that image.
So
that is wonderful.
This idea of how, right, that's the question, right? How did this happen to me? Well, it happened to me because love and pain were familiar. It happened to me because I'm a smart cookie. And so my brain very quickly identified that guy as an abuser. And I went, and I was drawn to him like bees to honey because it's familiar. The flaw in the system is it's a false positive. It's a false positive. So if you want to change it, you have to change your response with this big prefrontal cortex. Because the flaw in the system is your subconscious is tasked with keeping you alive. It's the best computer on earth. And so it will filter 2 million bits of information that it's taking in every moment to find what's familiar and highlight it. When you walk into a room, you don't consciously choose who pops and who doesn't. You don't choose who's attractive in that room. It just happens. And it's a myth that it's happening by accident. Your mind is highlighting what is familiar. So the flaw in the system is your subconscious can't judge or analyze. It just does it by saying, if I bring Tiphany or Orna more of the same experiences, it's likely they'll continue to survive because they've already survived everything they've gone through. So I'm going to highlight more similar things so they continue to have more similar experiences. But it doesn't know if those familiar and similar experiences are leaving you blissfully happy or miserable. The analyzing only happens in the big prefrontal cortex. So that's the big flaw in the system. And the slow love that's really for everyone and anyone in the dating process is to start evaluating yourself first and cultivate discernment through the dating process and pay attention. I wouldn't, 10 years earlier, if I would have had the date with the hot guy who triggered my inner critic, I'm not saying that guy was abusive. I just knew he wasn't my guy because I didn't want to be talking to myself that way after I was with my person or, oh my gosh, living with my person, right? I'm sure there was nothing wrong. I don't think there was anything wrong with him as far as he wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
Probably because I didn't feel at that time I was good enough for him. So I was twisting into a pretzel trying to earn love. Right? Because that's what we do. We think we have to earn it just like that little kid.
Yeah.
Right? How can I please you, mommy? How can I please you, daddy? How can I get your attention, mommy? How can I get your attention, daddy? So the other component that makes this difficult is most people are conflict avoidant. And I think this is really important because if you're hearing us right now and you don't ever want to pick that toxic or abusive person again, that kind of person, you'll never find your right match, ever, if all you do through the dating process is avoid conflict. Never. So I'm not saying go look for conflict. It'll come up. Don't worry about it. It'll happen.
Oh, don't worry. We're humans. It's going to happen.
Don't ignore the miscommunication. Don't ignore the difference of opinion. Don't ignore it. How does that, let me slow down. My brain is going faster than I can talk.
I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see you so excited about this. And this is so juicy. I'm so excited we're getting here. So go ahead, keep going.
So what is the dynamic you desire to have between you and your beloved when things go south, when there's miscommunication? How do you want that person to treat you when you're upset? I wasn't allowed to have feelings in my family of origin. I wasn't allowed to be upset. The only person that could be upset in my family of origin was my mom. But see, my mom paraded her feelings like King Kong with chest beating and everything. Rah, 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 rah. My mom was angry. And so I never wanted to be angry because I didn't like it when my mom walked around the house chest beating angry. So I learned to hold on to it and hold on to it and hold on to it and make myself small. And what are we talking about today? We're talking about raising the volume, turning up the volume.
Yes.
So don't avoid conflict. Don't look for it. Just address it. Like I like to say, clean as you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people do that when they're cooking. They clean as they go. Some people don't. They wait till the end and then clean everything up. When it comes to love and dating, clean as you go. Because then you get to find out if you can maneuver through those miscommunications, those little conflicts, even the big ones, right? When you want to share your life with somebody, life will throw you curveballs. I promise you. Just like life throws you curveballs when you're single. So life will always have challenges, but you need to know if you can make it through that person, right? That's part of the skill set for lasting love that we didn't learn because for most of us, it wasn't modeled very well when there was conflict.
So I am listening to you right now, and I'm comparing my two relationships, my ex, my 19-year, and then my current. We've been together almost 4 years. And I'm really looking at my patterns. And I've done a lot of work in this area. But what I love about this conversation is I'm like, oh, I'm even getting like another little way to look at this. And so when I look at my 19-year relationship, I walked on eggshells. Like everything was about his happiness. Nothing was about my happiness. And if I brought anything up for my happiness, it was a point of conflict. And so I would avoid that as much as possible because I just wanted peace in the home, which meant there was never peace in the home, and especially not for me. Fast forward to current relationship. And we had a conversation early on. And I said to him, look, happiness is great. We all want to be happy. I want to know who you are in the bad times. I want to know who you are when the shit hits the fan. Are you my guy? And can we work together as a team? And we've been through shit hitting the fan. Our relationship started 2 or 3 months before COVID. And he got cancer early on in our relationship. And I had to have a hysterectomy and, his sister dying. Like we've had stuff, and plus kids. I've got 2 kids. And so we've got all of that. And I have to say, every single time we've had big issues like those and all of the small things in between, money and raising children and how fast you drive
or how you make the bed or who makes the coffee,
how you make the bed, everything in between. It is a very respectful, like you say, cleaning house. We're not going to always agree, but we're able to have those conversations in loving, respectful ways and come to a place where we honor each other and grow closer from that. And it's such a different experience for me. And so hearing you say this really validates those differences versus avoiding conflict and the misery that comes with that. And the conflict's going to come. How are we going to deal with it? Having that conversation early on of this is what's important. I just love that.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It brings me to another point that I think is really important we discussed today, because on some level, and it's mostly women, there are some men like this, but I think it happens mostly to women. And it's this idea that love equals sacrifice.
Oh, yes.
And this is really, I think, an important message to turn the volume up on, is that a parent to a child, that love, yes, absolutely. Is it appropriate for a parent to sacrifice for their child? Yes, 100%. That child is dependent on you. But when two complete people, right, they're complete, they're not incomplete. We're not going to be complete too. We're going to say that one again. But when 2 grown adults come together in a relationship, that relationship doesn't require sacrifice of your needs, of your needs. So the most important thing to know as you cultivate discernment through the dating process is to know the difference between what you need and what you want. Because your wants are negotiable all day long, but your needs are not. every single one of our thousands of clients that Matthew and I have had over the past 14 plus years, at some point they ask us, do you guys fight? We like laugh. We're like, yes. And then of course they go, what does it sound like? We're like, it sounds like a fight. I mean, I think you could tell my passion. You've commented on it, my passion coming through. I'm a very passionate person. My husband is also a very passionate person. So it's not about whether there's conflict. I mean, I could spend, hours and hours and hours telling you all the things that went wrong between me and my beloved Matthew. It's not whether there's conflict that tells you if it's this right person. It's what happens when there's conflict. Mm-hmm. Because there's a way to turn conflict into an even deeper connection. Yes. And when you do that, like I think for me, like that early part, I told you we started dating in 2007. I can look back on that time and I have all the happy memories of people that do love by accident, even though we did love on purpose, right? They're these wonderful memories and they're great. But when I think back, it's nice, but it's a little shallow. It's a little bit more like infatuation than it is like this deep depth of love that is between us now after everything we've been through all these years. Because that's what we want. We want someone who gets us, who will stand by us, and who knows that you're better together than apart. And you don't know that after 2 or 3 dates or 2 or 3 months. You just don't. So slow love, I'm going to just give that tip again. You want to take your time. You want to take your time.
That is beautiful. Thank you. And so many of the toxic relationships that I know were not slow love. In fact, they were often love bombing type of situations where somebody comes in hot and heavy and you're the one for me and bringing flowers and bringing gifts and sweeping you off on vacation. And lo and behold, you're in an exclusive relationship within a couple weeks and proposing marriage within, a couple months. And, and then suddenly they turn on a dime and they're no longer that person that they were 6 months ago. And you're like, but wait, that you loved me so much and now you want to hurt me? Like, where does this come from? And it's because we didn't slow down and take it slower and really observe and notice. That's beautiful. All right. Do you have anything else on this topic of domestic violence and how did I get in this relationship, whether it's toxic or abusive? Do you have any last things you want to say to our people listening?
I don't think it has to do about the how. I think we covered that pretty thoroughly, but there's something I want to say that I think is really important, that if you're listening to us today, and if you are in any kind of toxic or abusive relationship where you're sacrificing your needs, it's not going to get better. Mm-hmm. It will only get worse. So get out and figure everything else out later. Get out. Please get out, because it will only escalate. It will only get worse. It will never get better. And I know it's hard for me to say the words because I know you think that other person is giving you something you won't get from someone else. That's not true. I want you to know a universal truth. The love you seek is inside of you. It's in you. And it's that love that you have for yourself that is reflected back to you through the eyes of your beloved. So get out and figure out the details later.
That is the most important advice. And I really want that to sink in to everybody. Very important advice. So thank you so much for sharing that. We're now going to move into a little bit of a fun, lighter part of the podcast where we get to learn about Orna. We talked about a lot of big, heavy topics, and I think it's important. It's really important to raise our volume on the big, heavy stuff, but it's also important to raise our volume on some fun and joy and getting to know people a little differently. So at this point, I have 3 questions I ask every guest. And the first one is all about books. I am an avid reader. The people that listen to this podcast, avid readers. I know you're in the midst of writing a book, so your reading time might be a little limited right now, but we're very curious. What is the book that's really speaking to you right now? What are you loving?
It's true. And, we've been blessed with the book deal, which is unreal to my brain because I'm an avid book reader. The library saved me as a little girl. That was my safe haven. So I voraciously gobble up books, but taking a break. So instead of taking in, putting out, writing our first manuscript, Matthew and I have a book deal. Thank you, Tiphany, for even mentioning it.
So excited for you.
That's what I want to shout from the rooftops. I'm like, I have a book deal. Now I've got to write it. So I just want to mention the last book that I read before I dived into writing ours is The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. It's a big one and so juicy. And as a creative person, I just loved every bit of it.
Will you give us just like a 3-sentence summary about that book? What is The Creative Act about?
Well, I thought it was going to be different, which is why I picked it up because I did work in the entertainment industry and I worked in the music industry for a long time, and so Rick worked in the music industry, and so that's why I picked it up. But he barely talks about that. But everything that he dives into about being creative is like I don't know that I can summarize it because there's like so many juicy ahas and sound bites, and it's phenomenal. So if you are a creative person, it's like a must read. It's like should be at the top of your to-do list.
Okay, good. Sold. Putting it on my list. I love it. Yeah, all right, the next fun question. They're making the movie of your life, Orna, and you get to pick 3 songs for the soundtrack. What 3 songs are you going to pick?
I'm going to pick the song that literally saved my life in 1994. It was at the top of the charts. Oh my gosh, I almost never tear up when I do these interviews, but it's Hold On by Wilson Phillips. It was at the top of the charts. I couldn't go anywhere without hearing it. And that was my anthem. So back to you, who's going to leave and get out and save yourself, find an anthem, find whatever, Katy Perry's Firework, Kelly Clarkson's Stronger. I don't care. Pick something, play it and let it feed your soul, because thank you, any of the girls in Wilson Phillips. Thank you. It's ironic that I would fight to save my life. And then after that event, actually think about taking it. So thank you to the Wilson Phillips girls, because I held on thanks to your song.
Oh, I wish I could reach in and hug you right now.
Okay, let's move on to something a little lighter. So another song that I would have to have in the sound, it's a movie of my life. I'd have to have this song in there. It's a sweet little song by Jewel, and it's called I'm Sensitive. And as an extroverted empath, I think that everybody thinks I'm so tough. And I was just going to say, I'm so not. Like, I'm so sensitive. And like the lyrics are about being careful with, she sings, be careful with me because I'm sensitive. No, actually, I'm mixing up songs. She says that I'm sensitive song is I'm sensitive and I'd like to stay that way. So don't, you know what I mean? I do. I want to stay sensitive. But as an extroverted empath, I hear all the time that other empaths that are introverts, as if all empaths are introverts. I'm like, that is so not true. But I'm sensitive and I'm a sensitive person, and I do want to stay that way. It's part of who I am, and I cherish that part. And my husband, I remember at one point early on in getting to know each other, he says, oh, that's just a candy-coated shell on the outside. You're all nougat on the inside. That's what that song reminds me of, all the nougat that's inside of me. And the other one is a great anthem too. I can't help myself, but it's Journey's Don't Stop Believing. And this one is so special. I know it's almost cliche. I was talking to my husband before doing this interview, and you gave me these questions that you were going to ask me. He says, you can't not put Don't Stop Believing. I'm like, but it's cliche. It's cliche. And he goes, no,
it's okay. It's all good.
There's a reason why I had to say it. And I think it's important that I share, because when I was younger, I would say God talks to me through the radio, which I think is true. So thank you, for all these songs I've mentioned, they came from God through the radio, but even through a streaming service. And so whenever I've been wondering about do I keep going with whatever, when challenges arise, I will hear Don't Stop Believing. It will turn up. It'll be the background of a TV show I'm watching. It'll be on at CVS. It'll be, it'll be whatever. Like, it will turn up. And so because God talks to me through the radio or the streaming service or whatever, God constantly is telling me, don't stop believing. So that would have to be in the soundtrack of a movie of my life.
This is such a fun way to learn about people. I love this. I love that we're learning this about you. Okay. Last question. And it's all about raising your volume. My tagline is raise your volume, I'm listening. So I would love to hear, what is the latest thing you've raised your volume about?
I've been in a writing bubble for most of this year. So what I've been using my platform and my voice for is to support other women entrepreneurs, other women business owners, other women authors. And there are no social events that have been on my calendar for months and months and through the end of the year. The only things that I've been doing are things like this, where I can come and support another woman in raising her volume. So that's what I've been turning up the volume by supporting someone else to raise their volume. I hope that's an acceptable answer for you too.
I think that's a beautiful answer. Is so many times our act of helping amplify somebody else raises us as well. Like, we all rise, right? When the water rises, all the boats rise. And so I love the idea that we as women were breaking that awful cycle of being in competition with each other, and instead, well, let's support each other and be there and step up. And I do appreciate that you stepped up for this, because I know you mark off, we are recording on a Friday, and you mark off Fridays for writing days. You knew I really wanted to get this episode out, and you knew that this was a topic that was just so burning in my soul right now because of my personal situation with losing my sister-in-law to domestic violence. And you jumped through hoops to make this happen today. And so I really value that. And I think that is so important. And so thank you for giving me that gift and using your voice to help me and to help the women that are listening to this episode. And I know it will make a difference. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month is October, and I generally in like August start booking a lot and booking topics. This topic for October, and this year I didn't put any calls out, but the calls came in anyway, and I thought I have to do this. It's too important. Yeah. It's too important a topic, and it's too close to my heart, and people don't have to suffer. And I just want to say thank you again, Tiphany, for being willing to have this very important conversation that I know can often be very uncomfortable and make people uncomfortable. And that doesn't mean we should shy away from it, because we're here to help people make their lives better and save lives. And you can change your life. It doesn't matter where you are right now. It's up to you. Look in the mirror and just tell yourself, yes, 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 I can. Because it's on you to make that decision. And that's all it takes sometimes. And then tell someone, and then tell another person, and then tell another person. And I promise you, they'll take your hand, and whatever you need will appear.
That's very true. And it won't be an easy path, and it will be painful, and you will cry, but it is okay, because you will get through and you will make it. And thank you. Thank you for that. I know people are going to want to find you and reach out to you and learn more from you. What is your favorite way to have people get in contact with you?
Go to www.loveonpurpose.com. And
that's easy.
Just go to loveonpurpose.com, but then click over to the blog, because Matthew and I have that there's so much great stuff on our blog. We have an award-winning blog. I get to tout that from datingadvice.com. And there's a lot of other places that rank us in, the top 5 of love blogs. So there's a ton of great articles there for you. There's a really wonderful search on the blog. So if you're looking for a particular topic, that's where you want to go. But please make use of that free resource, because we put those articles out there just for you to get the help you need. So start there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It has been an honor and a pleasure to have this conversation with you today. Thank you.
It's been an honor to be here. It's been an honor to get to know you, Tiphany. I think this is a budding, really yummy friendship. And I thank you from my full heart. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but this episode brought up so many emotions for me, from the angst and the fear and the compassion I felt for her when she was telling her story of domestic violence, to then her emotions of learning about our patterns and being able to fix our patterns and change our patterns. This episode just took me on a journey, and I'm so grateful for this conversation. This podcast is an academy where we learn how to raise our volume. And so there's something that I really wanted to bring out, one point in particular that I really wanted to bring out that I think is super important from this episode. And that is, talk to people. Ask for help. Let people know what are going on. Seek people that can help you out. Orna got help from her neighbor in that terrible, horrible night. She accepted the help from her neighbor. And then afterwards, she continued seeking out help so that she could get herself healthy and find her way into a beautiful, healthy relationship. The same thing happened to me in my relationship. For so long, I kept things quiet. I didn't tell anybody. I was ashamed of what was going on. In fact, sometimes I wondered if it was just I was making this up. Was it all in my head? Because I was being gaslit so much and being told that all of these quote unquote problems were quote unquote in my head. And so I didn't even know how to talk to people about it and put on a really good game face, happy smiling pictures, and to the outside facing world, it looked like we had a great relationship, and inside I was dying. And it wasn't until I finally started talking about it and asking for help and finding the right people to help me. Not everybody is there that can help you. Not everybody will understand. So I'm not saying the first person you talk to and you raise your volume and you say, I need help in this situation. Not everybody is going to be able or capable of helping you, but you will find the person or persons that can be there for you and can help you. And I will also tell you, just the act of raising your volume about what is happening to you will raise your confidence and your ability to deal with the situation, because there is something about finally voicing what is happening to you that builds that confidence inside you to go ahead and start getting that help you need. And so I want to encourage that for you. I know for me, my path was to bring it up, and I let my dad know what was happening. And he said, well, why don't you call this hotline? And I called the hotline. I'm like, I don't even know. Is this really abuse? Is this what is happening? And they're like, yes. They gave me resources for help. I found a local women's shelter called Laura's House. And I went to meetings there, 12 weeks of meetings. And I went to therapy there and went through a course to help me figure out what was happening to me, what patterns I was trapped in. And I got resources, I got help. And then I was able to take those next steps to extricate myself out of my toxic marriage. It was not an easy path. It was not an easy thing to do, but it was very, very important. And so I encourage you to raise your volume and ask for help. I also encourage you, if you know somebody that is raising their volume even to a whisper and asking for help, if you at all are remotely capable, be there to help them in some way, shape, or form. At the very least, let them know you believe them. Don't question them. Don't say, "Are you sure?" Believe them and help them find resources, help them get help, help them figure out how to get out. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today. My greatest wish is that every single one of you listening is able to be in a healthy relationship, whether it's a healthy relationship with yourself or it's a healthy relationship with another person. I hope that you are able to raise your volume and get in that healthy relationship. If this episode touched you, if it was meaningful, and I certainly hope it was, will you please pass this episode on to a friend that you think needs to hear the message? The number one way this podcast grows is by listener referral. And it means the world to me when you pass this episode on to a friend. And feel free to reach out to me. DM me. Instagram is one of the best places to DM me and send me a message. Let me know if this meant something to you. It truly warms my heart when I get to connect with the people that are listening. So thank you so much. Remember, raise your volume. I'm listening.